from either of them. So let's go ahead and start. So I'm going to start and lean on you, Darren. When it comes to power and speed is kind of the topic for today. And if you had to say out of vertical versus torque or turn versus horizontal, what would you say is the one area that you could improve speed the fastest from a player?
I think it's a combination of things. So a lot of players just don't move well. They don't have the athletic background. So getting them able to push into the ground a little bit harder, rotate a little bit faster, and kind of create that segmental motion is really important. So from that standpoint, it's getting them able to move better first, and then you can start layering on a bit of strength after that. Now, I mean, a player can be fast and strong without going in the weight room and spending a ton of time there. I mean, me growing up, that wasn't a lot of my focus, but I had a lot of like other sports that I played. So like hockey, baseball, golf. It was really developing athletic ability first, and I think that's what you see from the top end players at any sport really too, is they're able to go to other sports even at a young age and excel. And then once they hit that, like maybe 15, 16-year-old, and then they start to stand out in one thing. But for a lot of amateur players that we work with, especially like club members and women especially that don't have a sport background, it's hard to develop speed later in life to gain distance without that athletic background. There's still some of the windows, and you can still improve it, but there's a lower ceiling on that player compared to someone that's got an athletic background.
Yeah, I would agree with
the same thing on the tee.
I would totally agree with that. Like, I would say my question is, what I'd like you to answer from your background is, if you had a player that, let's just say, somewhat athletic, and you wanted to create a little more speed quickly, would you go the vertical route, the lateral route, or rotational route? Which way do you think you could quickly improve speed fast if you had a good athlete that's, you know, a decent golfer?
Well, it depends on their movement too. So if they lack vertical ability, so like on the body track, if they aren't hitting maybe over with a driver 1.2 to 1.3 times their body weight during the swing, then that would be an indicator of, okay, they're not using the ground effectively. But if I get them on K-Vest and they're rotating really well through the ball, at least numbers wise, and some feedback from you three, then that would be something that we would work more vertically. Now, let's say we get someone that's more of a jumper. To take a junior, for example, that extends a lot. They're putting a lot of force through the ground. We had an 8-year-old there the other day that put a ton of force through the ground, but he had to extend in order to create the club head speed. So yeah, so he gets a lot of side bend as a result of that. So it's kind of a mix. But
Mr. Humbert?
I would say that it's hard to say one answer for sure without evaluating what the player's strong point is and what they need to work on. Rory McIlroy, for example, he blends all three of those really well. So wouldn't
you say he's more of a jumper? Like, out of all the categories, he's probably more vertical than torque and lateral?
Yeah, you see that. And then, so I haven't seen his 3D data, but they've always said that his hips are upwards of like 600 to 700 degrees per second, which the average is mid 300s to mid 400s. So he's a lot faster hip wise, rotational velocity there too. But I would say he uses it very well.
So he's a high end rotator torquer and a high end jumper or vertical.
Right.
Because he doesn't move crazy laterally.
He has to be, right?
He moves so vertically that he doesn't move super, laterally in his motion. That's why sometimes
with
he
how
gets
far
a little
behind
stuck.
Yeah, so I was gonna say his club's so far behind him, he has to rotate, right? Like super fast.
That's how he kind of neutralizes, impact and club face closure. I've coming from myself. Let's just say have a athletic person that's looking for more speed. Like you said, Darren, you might have a junior that's already jumping, and they're jumping early extending, and then having to fall back and flip.
Right.
Now they're generating a lot of force into the ground, but they're lacking rotational force, which screws up their sequence. So therefore, they might not be tapping out on their potential for speed. So that player, you'd have to find a way to integrate more rotation and kind of blend those two together to get them a better impact condition.
Yeah. I think there's a threshold for speed for anyone. Like you look at the long drive guys, and they can hit the ball really, really far, but a lot of times, and the average ones are very inconsistent in terms of how much they're putting it in the grid. So playing golf with speed is different because we need that accuracy component too. So being able to generate speed is one, a matter of, okay, what's the body capable of swinging that stick, and what's the centerness of contact, which is where you guys come in. So it's what I'm looking at is, okay, how fast can I get that player swinging this object, whereas you need to deal with the accuracy component.
Well, another question I have for you is, you got a younger junior. Let's just say they have crazy vertical force. Most juniors are jumping. They're jumping off the ground to create the speed.
Right.
So, and they're tilting a lot back to offset, and like we see a lot of impacts where they're actually hitting it on the upswing off the ground with their irons. Now, what age do you think is the appropriate age to start utilizing the rotational force to offset that? Or should we just kind of let them continue to use the ground as much as they can, create as much speed as they can until they get stronger? Or is that something you think we could start trying to tap into maybe even when they're younger?
I think it is probably something that you could tap into when they're younger, but you might sacrifice their distance in the short term. To where it's kind of like, the problem is if they don't develop speed at a younger age, then they don't carry it on
further down the road.
So
right.
If they're unable to swing as fast as they're able to with jumping, then that can become problematic. I would say it's going to be dependent on when does the player max out and grow. So for girls, it's typically around like 13 to 15, and then boys are about a year or two after that, sometimes even later. Where some boys will maybe want to start cutting that back when they're in college, and even around that age, where they've hit puberty, they've peaked, and they're kind of on that downslope of how they're growing. I would say to watch that curve and kind of work on it then. That way they develop the speed and the consistency.
Well, to give you an example, when Hunter was there the last time, and obviously we measured his path, he's a lefty. His path was swinging well into out because he was using so much ground force and having to kind of offset that to fall away from it. And all I asked him to do is just turn his head to the target faster, and we saw a different ground force and a higher velocity rotational force. So am I hurting him or am I helping him? I guess that's the answer. Obviously he hit it a lot straighter, but would I be pulling away from his overall power?
And you have to look at, hey, what's the club head speed difference? So you've got the ability to measure that with TrackMan, which is great. So you can see before and after on those segments, and you can see what the consistency and the contact is too. But like, I'm based on the measurement component. So if you're doing something that's going to help them, which I mean, consistency and long term, you've worked with a lot of juniors to see, okay, what makes a player stand out, like Chase, that can play at a high level and maybe have some movement patterns that aren't considered optimal at a young age.
Yeah. Like for me, the reason I wanted him to rotate a little more, have his head, it was basically neutralizing him falling back. And we saw his path change. We saw his control of the ball change, and his distance basically was the same or a little bit higher. But in the overall terms of his speed, we might have reduced his speed, but he hit it a little better, more in the sweet spot, which produced a longer shot, a more predictable shot.
Right. So you look at power, it's going to be a component or total distance, ball speed. So the higher the ball speed, the lower the handicap. TrackMan came out with that data when they initially came out. So it's ball speed is going to be a factor of how fast is the club moving and what's the smash factor. So if you've got a really high club head speed with a low smash factor, that's not going to do you real well. Say at 110 miles an hour, you get the same ball speed when you swing 100 miles an hour. It's going to be more optimal to swing at 100 miles an hour. You're going to be more accurate. So I think that goes back to the threshold for players too, is where's their ball speed peak and where do they lose some accuracy there as well. I think that's maybe something that you could do with juniors.
I like that. Chase, do you have any questions about speed or power? Hey, Bobby, good to see you made it, bud. What happened? Why are you so late?
I forgot. And then
You forgot?
No, you're in the middle of a Fortnite game, bro. That's what it
I was
was.
cooking, man. I'm cooking freaking brats on the grill.
Oh, is that code for Fortnite?
No, I'll show you the brats. Jerk.
Yeah, I got a question for you, Darren.
Yeah.
I was watching a interview with Chris Como and Sasha McKenzie, two intense guys. They're pretty intense with their how they say things and portray things, and they're just intense. But he was saying how a faster backswing should equal more swing speed, and I want you to kind of tell us why that's a thing, because it was over my head a little.
Yeah, so I think I've watched that video with Sasha. He also did a video with Cordy Walker and Mark Blackburn.
Yeah,
and,
I like Blackburn.
Where Cordy was swinging faster back, his club head speed jumped up, I think, above 113. So essentially what he's doing there is creating that faster backswing. Sasha puts it in his more technical terms than what I would as a PhD in biomechanics.
Right.
So the faster that he was loading back, in my eyes, what's going on there is he's creating this eccentric load through the body, which would be the backswing. So say you have a rock at the top of a hill, and at the top of the hill, it's got a lot of potential energy. So if you're swinging fast back, you're getting that rock to the top of the hill, fast, you're creating the stretch through the muscle.
Yes.
And the resultant force is a shortening of that muscle, and that produces the increase in club head speed. Kind of the same way that
Right.
we do plyometrics. You're looking to decrease the phase where you're in touch with the ground or in touch with the shortening.
So is it essentially, once you get to the top, you can only change speed so much? Is that what they're getting at?
It's reducing the amount of time that you are in that loading phase, essentially. So you're going back quicker, you're hitting that end because you're stretching out the tissues faster, and they want to shorten. So they want to get back to their resting state as quickly as possible. In terms of force generation, obviously if the player is moving suboptimally, an example of Cordy's swing there, he's a pretty good player. He's got a good swing. If you do that to someone who has issues, maybe losing posture in their backswing, it might make things worse.
I didn't like that because I've never thought about that in my life. I want to make a quicker backswing to hit it farther. I don't like that. I think it would make me kind of stop shorter, to be honest. If I'm quicker, I would want to stop shorter, you know?
I would disagree with that. I would disagree with that, Chase. If you were to time your backswing, now it's something that you never had to think about. But if you were to time from when you started to get to the top, pretty fast. And that's because you swing pretty fast. And those two match up. But you never had to think about it.
That's my thing, is that's never been a thought.
But if you look at an amateur and you watch how they get to the top, they're probably 3 times slower than you are.
Right.
You've already hit the ball by the time they're halfway back. So I think there's something to the pace. Just look at a long drive player. They're moving fast really early, and it matches up what their intention is on the transition and speed at impact.
The biggest thing would be for the amateurs move a lot more than and so they can't control the speed when they swing faster.
True.
No, and I get the principle. I just don't like it for the individual that's trying to swing faster. That's what I don't like. I get the principle. I just don't like that. Player A needs to go from 113 to 116, so try to swing faster in the backswing. I think that could be counterproductive because it's going to throw off a lot of his feels.
Potentially, but potentially it could add speed, and you might find that he can still control his impact. So
yeah, I guess it just had to be experience.
It's one of those things you might try out. Like just for instance, when we do those speed tests with the speed sticks, and we have the little machine that shows them how fast they're swinging, I always watch the pace of their swing, and when they're trying to hit it faster, they all swing faster on the backswing. It's an instant, like, it's just one of those things that happen.
Have you tried it with a student with a club and having to square it up to something?
Oh yeah, same thing. Like if I say I want you to max out, go as fast as you can, backswing immediately picks up. If you were to put that against their normal play swing, guarantee they're moving it back faster.
No, I mean like having to square up a face and hitting a straight shot.
Yeah, obviously they're going to have more speed, which equals potential for more variance in their ball flight.
Right.
But it is showing them that they can tap into more speed.
Right, some reserves.
Obviously, there's extremes on either side.
I just think sometimes there's a diminishing return if you're trying to swing a little bit faster at times. If you can control it and max out with those reserves and have a square face, you get great. But an extra 3 or 4 mile an hour isn't worth it if you're in the woods.
Right, and if you're talking about high athletes or high performers in golf, they all are swinging faster than an average player, and they're not thinking about it.
They control their low point a lot better than amateurs, so when they swing faster, they're still striking the ground in the same spot.
And like you said, Bobby, they control their variables of their pelvis, their spine, but they're able to move without having a lot of things moving around. So when a lot of things are moving around, there's no way you're going to speed somebody up and get them better.
You have to slow them down and work on the hip movement and all that stuff.
Do you find that players have a lot of swing thoughts when they come to see you?
Way too many. Way too many. And usually I'm like, especially the left brainers are like, well, what do you think about, if I get my left arm here and then I tuck my right arm and then try to turn my hips? I'm like, no. Throw it out. Get it out
Stop
of your
thinking.
mind.
Stop thinking.
Let's keep it simple here. All I want you to do is I want you to try to hit a cut. I want you to draw. I want you to hit high. More intention stuff that can lead to putting them into better positions without them thinking of all these. Because I've never met a player, Chase, of course, have you ever in your life said, I got to create a position with my hands in the downswing, or I got to do something with my wrist,
No.
or I got to get my
There's not
body
enough time. There's not enough time from the top to the bottom to even think about doing something like that. It's more of a feel thing.
Absolutely. So most people have way too many thoughts, don't they, Chase?
Yeah, it's just exactly. It's just I think one and go. Like it's okay to work on different things in the range, but I feel like on the course people are thinking about 2 or 3 different positions, and then it's just they're just paralyzed, man, just completely paralyzed. Sucks
So would you
to watch?
pick
Painful.
one thing to go with, or like when you're playing in a tournament, mentally where are you at with the swing? Then I know you have to think of something.
Yeah, so it's usually just one swing thought and a setup thought or two, like a static thought where I'm just like, okay, I need more tilt and I need a better ball position. That's stuff you can think about without even not even during the swing. And then during the swing, I would just think about stretching the left arm, think something like that. And that's not too much, right? Just one swing thought's great.
Yeah, that's why I like the super speed, because like I'll say, okay, think of 3 or 4 different things. Say you have that left brainer, and you get them on that swing radar, and say they're swinging at 90 miles an hour. I would say, okay, now we're gonna simplify it, and I just want you to think speed. I just want to just swing that as fast as you can, and it jumps up 10 miles an hour or more sometimes. And with women, I find that it jumps up even more, and they're surprised at how fast they can swing when they're not so technical.
I do think though that's I like that point though, Darren. I do think psychologically a swing thought is important though, because if you focus on performing that task, it takes your mind off of the difficulty of the shot. So for me, if I had a difficult shot and I was focused on stretching the left arm post impact, it took my mind off of how hard that shot was, and it got me focused more on my internal task. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
that's a great point, Chase. I like that.
It really did. I'm like, this shot is going to be tough, but instead of worried about how tough that next shot's going to be, I'm worried about just stretching the left arm, and it gets me just in my own little bubble, worried about what's happening at the ball as opposed to out in here, So I think a swing thought can be really good as long as it's like sometimes like even if my swing was perfect and in a vacuum it's perfect, I would still try to think of a swing thought just to keep my mind off of what's the trouble.
I don't think I've ever caddied you where you didn't have either something about setup that you were thinking about,
right,
or one thought. Never.
Right. Don't you think, Jordan?
Never.
Because like for me, like I think somebody can always think of something. Like I heard something today where it says there's 2 different swing thoughts. Or 2 different swing items you can work on. It's a drug. If you give somebody the wrong drug, it can be harmful. And then there's vitamins. If you give somebody a vitamin, it can be good for everybody, right? So somebody can always be thinking of a vitamin. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. That's a cool analogy.
I thought so too. It came from Como. Como's a wizard. That guy's crazy.
He is a wizard, man. He's like through the roof with where he's thinking and some of his theories that he's trying to prove. He's just trying to figure out things that are not talked about right now, which is pretty cool.
Right. He goes down a rabbit hole, man. But yeah, I think 2 or 3 swing thoughts. It takes what I just said to like in a bad way. It's just too much thinking about what's going on down here, and not as much about the target. But 1 swing thought, Darren, I think is awesome.
Yeah.
So do you think Bubba Watson has a swing thought when he's trying to, because he likes to curve the ball a lot more.
All flight.
Yeah,
He's more artist, and he's like trying to feel stuff instead of maybe looking at a straight line thinking, I got to hit this position, this position. He's more feeling it with his body and his arm.
Yeah, he's not doing swing thoughts. He's doing swing feels.
Yeah,
swing feels.
He's probably using a different part of his brain.
He knows what. Yeah, he knows what he has to do to pull that off, but he does it so instinctively. But I'm sure he sees it, visualizes it, feels it, but he's not probably thinking I gotta extend or
exactly.
I gotta hold off. He's not doing any of that.
That's probably why he's one of the longest guys on tour every year.
Freedom.
Yeah,
that's probably why he's won 2 Masters and contend like 6 of them.
Now, back to the power and speed. When it comes to, let's say you have an adult player that is maybe unathletic and they're a 25-30 handicap.
Yeah.
And let's say it's a female and she's hitting her driver when she absolutely center faces it 110 yards. Right?
Okay.
And she's like, what can I do? What can I do to create more speed so I can hit it another 10 yards? Like, what would be the fastest way to get that person to more speed and include potential swing adjustments, but also include what they might have to do with their body?
Safely, I always tell
safely
sprinting, kicking, and throwing, because that's likely something that she's not comfortable with and hasn't done too much of. It takes obviously some level of coordination to do that. But you take a look at MLB pitchers; they're able to long toss a really long ways. So that's a way to develop arm, to develop 98 miles an hour fastball. So if you get her throwing something and coordinated, kicking, planting on one side, and kicking to an object with some velocity, and then I say sprinting could be even like a high velocity cycle, something like that, if you don't want to run the risk of falling. But things like that can tap into those fast twitch muscle fibers and just kind of get them thinking on a fast level, without getting technical in the swing. And that could be something that you could put the club in her hand right after and see that club velocity pick up. I mean, that would be kind of my approach from building athletes rather than just players. Now, from your perspective, you're looking at where are her leaks in the golf swing that are causing issues, and that could be a lot of things.
Yeah, well, if it was anytime I have somebody that's looking for a little more speed, usually they're just not they can't use their hands very well. They've never trained their hands. If they lack coordination, they've never played sports, then they've never developed their body. So my first thing is that I would do would be try to create some kind of drill that creates speed with the hands. So I would probably have them swing a aiming stick and get as high a pitch as they possibly can to create speed and learn what it takes to create the speed. And it's funny because when I do that, they start off and have no whoosh and they're just using their body. And I'm like, okay, let's try to get the hands moving. Get those hands moving. And they start hearing that and they're like, oh man, I'm creating a lot of speed, but I'm not moving my body. And I'm like, exactly. This is your power force right here. Hands, wrist, arms. And then once they start understanding that the hands and arms have the biggest role on speed, then they can start training that day by day by day by day. Flip a club upside down, start flicking it, start hearing whoosh with your driver, irons, whatever. But they're paying attention to one thing only, and that's how fast they're swinging the club head and hearing that swoosh in the air. And it does take time. I mean, it's not saying they're going to get it after one lesson, but if they were to do that over a 3-month period, I can promise you we're going to see a lot more speed when they're hitting the ball, driver, whatever, because they've developed that hand coordination, arm-hand coordination.
And that's going to help consistency of strike too.
Absolutely.
Because their body's not moving all over the place now. So, which leads to higher smash factor and more distance.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that Chase was surprised that, from your elbows down, that's 85% of your speed.
Yeah, that was like, wow.
That's. I mean, you take away the legs, you can produce crazy speed with what all this is doing. And what's the guy's name? Lumac, the big tall guy. He's doing research
or whatever.
Yeah, Lusak. He's doing research on feet together swings and flamingos, on how fast the club head is moving compared to a normal base.
Oh, wow.
And he's found that the sequencing is way better, and the efficiency and the speed is increased for the most part for everyone across the board.
So,
which is pretty amazing.
How I think about it is essentially the body is just to put the arms into place, right? To hit a good golf shot, essentially, right?
It just supports what the arms and the hands are doing.
Right.
It complements what everything else is doing. And what's taught today is turn. Right. If I could get that out of my students' mind, that's the worst thing they could ever hear is I got to turn. That's all your over top players. They can't hold on to angles. They can't use their hands because they're using their body too much. So we spend about 90% of our time shutting people down and trying to teach them how to use their
arms and hands. Yeah, they get behind the 8 ball quick.
What were you gonna say, Bobby?
So I mean, when the hips, when we turn them properly, that's the only time that actually speeds it up is when they separate. So, but the arms, then they're falling behind more. That's why it's the arms and this is creating that speed and the lag. So, I mean, the arms are just as important in that. As soon as they get outside, that's when you lose all the speed, no matter if your hips separate.
Like I had a lesson today, and this was a guy that was a slider. Mm-hmm. He slid and then swayed, and he was offsides chase, and he got one of these positions, throw hold, right? And all I had him do is put his feet together, go to left arm parallel, and I physically wanted him to try to throw his hands as fast, the club head to the ball as fast physically as he possibly could, which slowed down his chest. Yeah, it slowed down his chest and got him to get his arms to cross.
So you had to feel like you're sucking the ball.
And and we did a before and after impact. He had shaft leaning forward versus cupping like a crazy man before.
God, so you tried to create a cup and he did the opposite effect?
Yep, because he slowed his body down. Because he was faster with his arms versus before he was woo!
And then he had to create a bunch of cuppage, right? How high was his dynamic loft with all that?
Before or after? Before he was hitting kind of these low little baby cuts or occasional little
did you have the TrackMan up?
No, I didn't have the TrackMan.
Okay, did he top a lot?
He was very shallow into the ball and had a hard time.
That's probably.
You there?
So did you try to get him?
Oh, yeah,
did you
probably.
It's probably something.
It's probably what?
That's probably something.
I'm on a little bit of a delay. Bobby jumped in.
All right.
No, keep going. I was gonna bring up Brooks Koepka.
I was just wondering, did you touch where his weight was at during the swing, or did you keep him more left while he was taking the left arm parallel?
Only things we did is we narrowed his stance. He was too wide, and we got him getting his chest to tilt towards the ball and his butt back, which gave him more opportunity to rotate.
Oh,
he
didn't have a prayer
instead of
rotation,
sliding.
huh?
Right.
Ugh.
And he said to him it felt like his hands did everything.
Yeah.
And then he looked at the video and his hips were turning more, his head was back more, and he saw his
I mean, it's very hard to
crossing.
it's very hard not to turn your hips with your feet together when you're taking the
Exactly.
swing.
We probably gained 40
I bet you-
degrees of hip rotation on the backswing.
Mhm.
Whoa,
Yeah.
that's big.
So I mean,
How far
So-
how far were his feet spread apart?
they were probably at least a foot width outside of his shoulders with everything.
Okay.
And he was super upright and
Yeah.
curved,
Where was he at the top, Jordan?
a little across the line, which I didn't mind because
Yeah.
it helped him put it back on plane beautifully. Actually, yeah, he was definitely on plane and slightly under, and then holding on obviously but you got to remember he was way out in front of it,
Ah,
so he complained of the big push fade that just drove him nuts.
So now he has a draw.
Now he's probably going to complain of hitting it on the left side of the course, which I'm okay with.
I'm sure he is too, though.
Yeah. He's like, I
I'd
haven't
rather
seen the ball draw like that. That's unbelievable. Holy crap.
When you're
And
hitting it
then-
that far right, it's going nowhere. Hitting the hook is not bad.
Like I
What I
told him for his
love-
game.
Andy,
his-
you explain
Say that again, Darren.
what I like about how you teach is you always tell the player you're gonna. I think a lot of people get frustrated because they go take a lesson and then they may do the same things that you would in the misses on the course. They don't understand that could be and then they abandon because they think they're doing worse. But I like how you always, every lesson I've seen you give, you're always saying this is what you're gonna see, and let me know when you see that.
Yeah, so I'm trying to let them know, hey, this is going to be a change, and you're going to see something change with your ball flight. Don't be scared. Versus if they didn't know that and they started seeing something that they're like, whoa, I haven't been seeing that. That's bad. I'm going to go back to what I did. So is that sometimes can just set you up for, hey, dang, he knows what he's talking about. He kind of called what I was getting ready to go do. I'm gonna listen to this guy.
I mean,
Okay.
and if they don't see it, then they're not doing it right. They'll
Correct.
get some feedback.
Correct, Amundo.
But typically, they don't even mind seeing something new, right, Jordan? They just want to see something new.
If
Tired of
they
that.
if they've been seeing push fades and they see a big pull hook, they're like, holy crap, I haven't seen that. Holy that
You're like,
that's-
yes.
there's something's changing here. This is awesome.
Right.
So they're very open because they know that we're moving down a new path, and
That's a good
to
word.
improvement.
They're open. I like that.
And obviously, for the most part, they're going to be extreme to the other end, and then I'll work back more towards the middle.
Yeah, it's like the pendulum. They're
Mhm.
over here. We move them all the way to the other side, and then try to find that middle ground.
Because they got to learn how to control the face and with their body.
Now, Darren, a quick question for you. We were talking about vertical torque rotation versus lateral. One of the things that I've learned more and more here in the last month is the hip girdle. How important the hip girdle is to everything. It's almost the brains of the swing, in my opinion, after kind of watching a lot of videos.
Yep.
Would you agree that the hip girdle and the way it moves dictates basically everything else, how your body moves?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the hip and the lumbar spine only moves essentially in one direction. It flexes and extends. So if, say, the hip's out of place, say the right hip is too high in the backswing, or even at start, you see that oftentimes too. When they move into the backswing, that right hip goes high, that lumbar spine is going to shift everything above it to the left. So they may lose posture. They may get this reverse spine angle motion.
Darren, can you show us this by chance?
Yeah.
I would like to see this visually, my
So
friend.
say I get, might be a little close. So say I'm set up and my right hip is a little higher than my left, and then I move into my backswing. If my right hip is too high, say my left knee flexes too much, and my spine begins to tilt back towards the target, then I start to have issues there.
Okay.
Because that lumbar spine is only going to move through flexion extension. So when I go here, my lumbar spine is only going to be able to move this way or this way, and everything else above it is kind of moving independently now. So if my right hip is higher in the backswing, then my upper spine has to work harder to stay level because everything underneath it isn't working optimally.
So if your hips are level at start, what you see in the backswing is your right hip starts to go higher, right?
Yeah,
It should.
Ideally, they're
Because
like level or left hip's a little higher
Okay.
at start. And then, say on average, right hip for a right-handed player is going to be about 10 degrees higher than the left and at the top of the swing. And then as they approach impact, that's just going to switch.
Yeah.
So the left hip is then higher. That puts everything above it, again, in a better position. So if you can start to control the pelvis and how much it's not only side bending, but rotating and anterior, posterior pelvic tilt or bend, then you can start to control what's going on with the upper body.
And would you say a good hip movement would help lead to better balance and control and with the body?
Oh, sure.
Okay. I mean, because that's what I've been looking at a lot with setup and everything. But then I'm looking at how the hips moving a lot at the beginning of the swing, because most of the amateurs and kids, they don't know how to move it properly, and it leads to a lot of falling back or over or reverse C or everything.
I'm big on, but I grew up playing hockey,
Mhm.
and I think there's a big correlation to how hockey players use the edge of their skates and how their hips have to orient to that skate blade in order to stay balanced. So every time they stride out on the right leg, that right hip can't move outside the right skate. Otherwise, they'll lose an edge and they can't push off of it. So as long as that skate is centered underneath the hip, and they can stride out and provide that lateral force.
Is that why hockey players hit it a mile typically?
Yeah, they know how to use their hip girdle.
God, it's amazing. These guys are like five. I specifically remember a kid that went to UVA and he was like 5'7". He was a shrimp, and this kid carried it 290, and he played hockey. He was a hockey player, but like back in the day, and he carried it 290. I'm like, dude, what the heck is wrong with you?
You'll find a lot of hockey players are like left-handed shots, and then they golf right-handed too. So it develops both sides, and that coordination. To take Jordan Spieth, he's not the longest guy on tour, but obviously plays at a high level. Ryan Winther on the long drive circuit, he said that he threw right and left-handed, was ambidextrous. And in his yard, he would hit rocks with a baseball bat, right and left-handed, and see how far he could get them. And that developed his speed. Granted, he's like 6'7" as well, so that helps.
That helps.
But simple things like that can play a big role, and oftentimes I think kids like that grow up to be high level athletes, they don't know that they're doing those things
I mean,
at the time, but it benefits them in the long run.
when you're looking at all these players and they're off right now, they're swinging left-handed and they can still carry it 300 yards, 290 yards. Brooks Koepka, freaking Dustin Johnson. I mean, I can't even barely hit a ball left-handed.
I don't think it's a prerequisite, but
but that's how coordinated they are, and their thoracic can move that way. And like, I'm so tight, I can't move that way at all.
Quick question for you, Darren. If you were watching a player from behind them, the correct pelvis movement, if you drew a line up their crack, and so when they turn their pelvis correctly, let's say their right butt cheeks over here, their left butt cheeks here. Yeah. When they start turning, their right butt cheek should end up on this side of the line. That's what I've noticed. That's what I've noticed from the best players. Their whole pocket goes on this side of the line, and then they stay on that side of the line.
Yeah, they're shifting left very early, and you see that in their footwork too. So they pressure left a lot sooner.
I was going to say, what do you see in the pressure when you see a proper hip turn on your feet?
Almost always is lead arm parallel on the downswing is at least 70% over on the left side. And there's so many amateurs that don't do that.
What would you say the pressure is at the top for, let's say, tour players? When they reach the top, where's the pressure under their feet?
Is it like
50-50?
50-50 or shifting left, most likely at that point.
Do you see it like in their right heel and then the ball of their left foot on the backswing?
That'll be dependent on path. I mean, it's maybe something that like a player at Chase's level, you wouldn't even maybe think of what's going on with the feet.
Yeah.
But if your path is slightly in to out, you're going to be more of like a right heel, left toe.
Okay.
And then out to in would be opposite. You'd be more right toe, left heel on the downswing.
Hey, Darren, does speaking of pressure, to the maximum point on the lead foot is obviously, on the finish or whatever, but isn't there a point where you're like left arm parallel and you have to come back a little bit to the trail foot?
Yeah, and that's mainly because they're pushing so hard on the left foot that some players, take Bubba Watson for example, it's his right foot, but his lead foot is going to leave the surface of the ground. So the only thing in contact is that trail foot. So on a pressure mat, it's going to look like all that pressure.
Right.
Because if you're pushing so hard through the floor, you're going to come up. It's like a vertical jump.
So that's what Nicklaus used to do too, right? Because his foot would come up a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I think you'd see a lot of the same things with every over history.
So what you're saying is there are several players, when they get to impact, they might have more pressure on their trail foot than their lead foot.
Yeah. There's some that don't. So it's
a matter how they're using their ground force.
Yeah. It's what's consistent is when that lead arm is parallel is roughly where they're maxing out their vertical pressure.
And then from there, it depends on a little bit of path probably, and how much right side.
Yeah, path, how much they're pushing. I think like a Bubba Watson, he's off the ground. Patrick Reed spins his foot. Jordan Spieth kind of rolls his ankle. So that's not something that's consistent from great player to great player.
Those are preferences.
So if you see that on the lesson tee, that's not something that you would say, hey, oh, that's a problem.
There's a lot of wiggle room there, right?
Right.
I would say the wiggle room that's not there, though, that the tour players all do, is their pelvis. Obviously, it turns more than everybody else's, and it changes direction faster than everybody else's.
On the way down, Redwood?
Yeah.
I think when you said the cheek thing, that's the most accurate thing. For most amateurs, we don't see that. They keep it more on the other side.
Yeah, their right cheek stays over
Uh-huh.
here the whole time. It never goes on this side of the line.
On the opposite side of the target, right?
So yeah, so if the target's over here and that's the right cheek, left cheek, their cheek stays over here on the backswing.
That's
Yeah.
Versus-
why
Okay.
that's why
Versus
they
a
have
tour player goes, they get their right cheek all the way on this side of where that line was.
and that's why they have a hard problem controlling their low point because of that.
Yeah, they have way too small of a time frame to get all those things to match up.
Reorganize.
Reorganize.
crazy.
Good work.
So
Um,
what's
yeah,
a
makes
thing
sense.
you would do? What's a thing you would do to teach that?
Change of direction. Chase, we did a video on changing direction when the left arm gets parallel. By the time my arm gets to parallel, I'm already trying to move laterally and then swing the club. Things of that nature. I'm sure you've seen people get their
So
stand.
would you say the
so
step
you-
swing?
Yeah, like you
That was
would
pretty
see.
stupid.
Yeah, so if you get your feet normal, put the
Mhm.
ball in the normal position, then bring your feet together, and
Mhm.
as soon as you start the backswing, you already start stepping.
So put your feet together and then while you're taking the club back, you're stepping and then you're swinging.
Right,
Okay.
and I've also seen one where you move both feet from Jake Hutt, which I thought was pretty good. But that's taking a lot of coordination. That'd take a pretty athletic person to be able to do that. But it's
Tough to
funny
do for
when
an
you ask
older person.
when you ask a person to start their backswing and start going forward. If you do it slow, they can
Mhm.
do it. They can start changing direction as they're moving back, so they can actually
When
get
they
it.
speed
But
up, they don't move in the right. They
Yeah,
don't move in the right sequence.
they just don't move that lower body at all. They'll just try to do it with their chest and their upper body, not their lower body.
So Darren, when the hip girdle's turning, you're seeing with the left knee, if you're right-handed, the left knee kind of bends and the right leg kind of straightens. Is that correct?
Is he with us?
Yeah, he's here. He's just muted. You're muted.
Oh.
There's two of them now.
You there, Darren?
You're muted.
Well, what I see, Bobby, is on the
Mhm.
There you go.
backswing. On the backswing, I see the knee
Mhm.
straighten a bit.
The right leg?
Yeah, with all the best players, they straighten a bit. They still have some flex. They
Yeah.
don't lock it out. They
Mhm.
don't lock it out, but they all straighten a bit, and then
That's what raises the hip, right?
right, and then well, that gives them the rotation,
Mhm.
and then in the downswing they add flex. They all add a little flex in transition.
And that's when they're like kind of rolling on their inside of their foot transfer.
So it's just essentially not the correct pressure shift is what we're talking about, right?
Yes.
Because pressure
So-
shift is how you rotate.
So I've kind of gone to like when they don't know how to do that. I've taken a club and had the butt end pointing towards the target, and had them say point that to the ground. And when they do that, their hip girdle turns the right way, and they get the proper side bend.
Explain that again. So you get
So
A grip.
so I have the club here. I got my arm
Across your chest.
up here.
and I got the butt end pointing towards the target.
Okay,
And then they
so
have-
you get their shoulders to really steepen up.
So they have
Yeah, that
more of a side bend and a better shoulder plane that actually turns their hips.
you could.
Bobby, how
you
often do you see that? The shoulder
What's up?
plane not being steep enough. It's too shallow.
What was that?
The shoulder plane, like I think it's like pretty shallow a lot on folks, on amateurs. Do you see that a lot?
Yeah, I would say yeah, because they top the ball. They can't ever get a consistent strike on the. And that would relate with the hip motion too. If it's being on the right cheek staying longer on the right side of the ball. Would you say that, Andy?
Yeah, as soon as that hip girdle stays
Because then your
on
shoulders are going to have to match.
this side, you're gonna obviously the hip girdle's not in a good position, so
Mhm.
they're gonna probably extend and get real level with their shoulders at the top, and then they got a lot of work to do to get back to impact.
So if you get a good shoulder plane and hip movement, it should help with the consistency of strike.
Absolutely. And Chase, these are things you never had to worry about. Isn't that crazy?
No, it's
Well-
funny how many things I didn't have to think about as a player, but now I kind of do.
And I mean, and
I'm a
I've
teacher.
seen we could just put a club in a hand with a kid that fits them, and instantly they're athletic at all. They can hit it in the center of the face without even thinking about anything.
Yeah, it just allows their body to move easier.
I
You
had a girl whose parents bought her a 51-inch set, and she was probably 45 inches tall. And she couldn't hit the ball at all. It wasn't even coming close to it. I put a 45-inch club in her hand, and she hits it in the center of the face without changing
Unbelievable.
a thing.
That's
So,
pretty cool.
like, that's how crazy.
Easy-
I mean, that's how easy.
Easy
the golf-
lesson.
golf swing
Easy
is.
lesson
I mean,
there, bro.
if you're athletic, you can do easy things with the golf club.
I'm back.
Is Darren
Dude,
still here?
You're on a party wave, bro.
He's
Party
in Hawaii.
wave.
What's your thoughts, Ross?
A little throwback.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Ross, I like
Ross?
those drapes, man.
Ross, what were thoughts that you had as a player in high school?
Oof.
Hit the ball.
Let's
Ooh, a tiger.
think back.
How can I get nominated for Player of the Decade?
Yeah. No, I think a lot of my high school years, there was a lot of focus on extension. What were some of the things we worked on? God.
Chaplain.
Shaftling, yeah. Shaftling extension. I'd say postural wise.
Did you lose your angles pretty quick, Ross?
Yeah, I would lose it quickly. I
Old
would kind of
Dumperoo.
Yeah, I would come out of my posture a lot. I'd lose my spine angle a lot in high school.
Yeah.
That was something I was always kind of working on.
Purina.
So I would kind of rise up, get into my toes almost at impact, and then kind of release early, and just kind of get stuck on my right side a little bit.
Did you hump the goat?
Yeah, I still kind of hump the goat.
Andy, you remember my swing?
Oh my God.
So,
You're-
so my high school days, I didn't start till sophomore year, and I hit a lot. I shot 120 at 18 holes, and so I practiced hard the whole summer. And all I would think about was trying to hit a hook more because I was hit so much. I was more feel. I never got any lessons.
So you were just super steep.
Yeah, so I was trying to hit hooks, and that's what it was more of a feel thing, and I never really got instructions, so I had no clue what I was doing. It was just more trying to feel something else. And I mean, I don't know. There's a fine line between all this information we give them and feel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Would you-
that's a good question. That's a good question. Would you rather? It depends on the personality, but let's just say you had a player that is swinging end out, and you're like, okay, we got to fix that. And you said, hey, I just want you to miss this noodle, and don't hit it. Go hit some balls. That's not really saying anything about what their body's doing. That's just them. They have a drill. They gotta have
So
an
you
avoidance
set up
drill.
You set up the noodles and you say, swing it, hit the ball, and don't hit the noodles.
Yeah, avoidance drill. I mean,
Yeah.
they're probably gonna make some changes to their movement patterns without me saying, I want you here, 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 and here. Now
it's like putting.
that could work for some players.
Mhm.
Some players want more information. They want to know why, what's going on. So usually I always give them the why, so they kind of know what trajectory we're going.
Along these lines, guys, this is actually perfect. This is good. So I had a student today I got a fitting with, Randy Phillips, and I came to the conclusion that I think there are students where you need to tell them like kind of everything and then let them figure it out on how they're going to get to that point, right? You guys ever face that?
Oh, I think sometimes those are the best ones. You give them the information and they find it and figure it out on their own. That's powerful, because now they kind of, you almost let them think that they figured it out.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's how I feel, because I think he wants to be like kind of not in control, but he's like, all right, I'll do this. I'll do this. And I'm like, all right, yeah, as long as you hit better shots and you can get to that where I'm asking you, go for it, man. You know?
Yeah, that's just kind of taking that student and giving him the information, but making him feel like he came up with the answer.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Chase, isn't that what you got to
That's
do
a
with
big
BJ?
deal.
No, yeah.
No, yeah.
yeah.
He's a tough cookie. He's a tough cookie. Because with Beach, I mean, Andy can relate to this. He has a new mission with his swing on a weekly basis. Okay.
Oh gosh.
On a week.
I was watching this
Depend-
video, man.
Whatever he likes on Instagram that week, that's his thing, dude. So it could be, this guy or that guy, or maybe a sliver of what Andy and I are telling him. Who knows?
Yikes.
But you just gotta say, you gotta give him a little wiggle room and say, oh yeah, and then just kind of go back to take a little Yui and go to what you're saying, I guess.
Yeah.
So what do you guys think with your personality? If you came to me and you were too let's say too shallow, and I said, okay, this week I want you to put 2 tees in the ground and I want you to just try to make divots for the next week, and that's primarily all I taught you, besides maybe an adjustment to your setup. What do you think you would see a week later if that was all that they did do?
Hopefully a better shoulder plane.
Do you think that if the student was diligent enough to try to make that happen, then we'd see a pretty significant change in their pattern without going over a lot of details of what's actually going on? Or would they get frustrated because they couldn't do it and come back to you and be like, that sucked?
Depends on the personality, practice habits, and the
I can see both ways.
yeah.
Like, what's Pat? Is he give all the information and let him decipher from there, or what?
Yeah, totally, absolutely.
You gotta give him the ingredients, and he can cook up something, right?
Give him everything, and then he makes a really nice filet mignon every so often.
Right on the trail.
I mean, hopefully the person would figure it out how to hit the dang tee.
Right.
For you, man, and lessons, like, how much information would you want? Would you just want someone to say, do this? What are you? What kind of?
For me, I would want to know why. I'd want to know the why, and then I'd want something real simple or a task that I could go do for the next week, 2 weeks, that can be working towards that goal, the first step. And then I would just hammer that. I would just go crazy at that. And I don't care if I wasn't hitting it great. I'm going to continue to do that. That would be me.
I'm the exact same way.
I agree, Droid. I think that's where I think the majority of students fall, and you have the outliers, 15, 20%, or 10%, and then the 10% of the ones that are just like, okay, let me just miss the noodle and I'll go play that way.
Yeah, the average player just doesn't give themselves enough time. They're like, okay, he gave me this prescription. I'm going to hit a small bucket of balls. Oh, didn't get it. Okay, it's over. I'm going back to what I did. So you can't change something that fast. I think they just don't understand. It takes persistence and it takes some time, but you have to have one goal, one task. I'm going to keep freaking doing that until I get it.
Joe, it's like a good analogy I heard was it's like losing weight, right? So you have one good day at the gym, you're not going to lose 20 pounds.
Nope.
You got to keep going to the gym, getting on the treadmill, getting on the weights, and then over a course of a month, you're going to see some progress.
That's a good analogy.
Right?
Great analogy.
Hey, you're full of analogies tonight, Chase.
Dude, I'm Mr. Analogy, baby. I'm gonna have to write a book for you, Darren. I mean, some of them, when I hear a good analogy, I'm like, oh, I gotta write this down. Like that vitamin drug one, I had to write down too.
Good. You think of because we're lucky because we work with the percentage of players that might practice. Yeah, we run into the issue of players not practicing. So it's that's probably the biggest thing. You take Pat is on the way far end of the spectrum. I mean, he's taken thousands and thousands of swings, where you can't get Miss Haverkamp to take 5 swings before she goes out and plays. I mean, she's made it to the tee right at her tee time. And I think that's the biggest frustration for me. I think that's any other profession as well, is, I mean, whether you're getting someone to stick to an exercise program or something you gave them to work on with the swing. It's how bad do they want it, and what do they want to do to change it.
Dude,
Yeah,
go ahead, Rod.
I was gonna say, when people come take a lesson and I interview them and I'm like, "Why are you here?" They all say they want to get better, but the thing is, do they really? Not many of them really do. So that, I think they all want to get better, but they don't want to put or sacrifice the time to try to get there. So if you have one of those and you know that they're not going to practice, that lesson's completely different. Completely different. It's Band-Aid City, baby.
Right.
Okay, this is what you got. Let's just strengthen this a little grip. All right, go have some fun. You know, we're not going to be doing a whole lot more than that.
They're like the January.
Sorry, Chase.
Go ahead. It's like the January 2nd gym guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna join Planet Fitness and then go till January 15th and call it a day.
I think the parents and the kids that I deal with, for the most part, think, oh, we can do a lesson once a week. They'll be fine. They'll get better, you know. Yeah, they don't go practice at the range or chip and putt or do anything else. They just go for the freaking lesson.
I'll always kind of pry into, like, why do you want to get better? Why do you want to lose weight? I think because everybody has, like, oh, I want to lose 20 pounds. Like, why do you want to do that? Because there's something intrinsic that is the real reason as to why they want to get better. Whether that's just to move back to the tees or play a little bit more golf. Or they just want to look better for their spouse. I think that's probably a more important reason why. And if you can dig into that, then you're more likely to get them to buy into practicing or working out or making a change that's going to have an impact on them.
And I feel like the people that have open minds when they come to the lesson are more willing to put in the work than the people that, oh, I have this preconceived notion of my golf swing and I want to do it this way, and they tell you how to give their lesson. Basically, people that are open-minded usually have a better practice afterwards.
So I guess the psychological aspect of this is, how do you turn someone from A to B? You know, how do you turn someone from I'm going to take a lesson every other week, I'm going to get better without putting in the work, to talking them into, no, this is going to take some work. Like, this is just a small piece of the pie. And the bigger piece of the pie is really putting in a lot of time on the range. Not a lot, but I mean, it's going to take something.
I think the when they're in the lesson too, when they see the change and they get excited, they're more willing to practice too. Than if they don't see it right away, then they're not going to try to do it, you know?
Right. No, I think as a teacher, it is your responsibility to try to change their culture. Like, hey, okay, I know you don't if they say, no, I just like to play, I'm like, okay, how about we try to carve out an additional 30 minutes before you go play? You think you could handle that? And they're like, okay, I think I could do that. And in that 30 minutes, let's use some of the drills that we do and see if we can do that every time before you play. Give that a try and let's see what happens. And then before you know it, they're like, I actually practiced last week. Can you believe it, Andy? So I've seen that happen. I've seen people change their culture because they see the benefit on the course. So you can bring them to a different place, but some people are not. It's just a matter of the person. But like you said, Bobby, if you get somebody hitting a draw that's never hit a draw before in their life, they're excited, dude. They're gonna want to go to the range right after the lesson and practice and hit balls. And I guarantee their want and desire just went up.
because
A
they
lot.
can see the potential of getting better like that.
There's nothing better than hitting something you have never hit before, man. You want to keep
Mhm.
doing it and doing it and doing it. So for most people, I'd say that's pretty true.
Especially when you feel the compression and everything like that too.
I'll also ask, because everybody's had success in something. I mean, it's actually probably harder to create change in a junior because they may have not had experience with success in something else, so they don't realize how hard it is to truly be good at something. But like, say you take a businessman or woman and we say, okay, you did this. How long did it take you to get to that point in your career?
Good point.
How far in your golf career?
Isn't there a book
How much
about,
work do you want to put into that?
wasn't there a
that's-
book about 15,000 hours to perfect something?
Malcolm Gladwell, called Outliers. It's pretty sick.
Hmm.
That's a good point, Darren, because if you relay it that way and they're like, yeah, I was one of the best at my job. And you're like, well, how did you get there? I worked 80, 90 hours a week. I sacrificed a lot. I put everything I had into it. And they're thinking that, they're like, oh, okay, that's how I got that good there. So I'm going to have some of those same traits to be a good player. I mean, that's true.
Yeah, because I think they can relate to that, and it's something that they've done already. And that can start to create some of that culture, or even just bring back some culture.
That's really good there. As a junior, like you said, they haven't really been successful in anything yet, because they're obviously not in a career age. But I think that they have kind of a little bit of an advantage because my junior days, I was surrounded by other juniors my age, and they were trying to get better, to make their high school team, to go to college and play golf. So every day it's more of a competition angle than I'm going to get better for myself angle, right?
Well,
That's what drove me at least.
Yeah, you knew where you stood compared to the players that you had around you, and
Right.
you're like, I need to be better because this guy keeps beating me, and that pushed you and motivated you, and you knew to be at the top. All those guys are working hard. There's a few of them that were freak athletes that didn't have to work very hard, but that usually peters out once they get into college or
And if they were dominant the whole time, they're not half of them are not going to play because they just get tired and bored of it. It's like, and their parents are making them do it.
Yeah,
they're
that's
great.
exactly right, Bobby. It's an interesting transition though, because when people get older, it's more internal and what their handicap is. I want to go from a 15 to a 10, or a 10 to a 4. And when you're younger, it's like I just want to beat everybody, So it's like it's pretty interesting.
That's why it's good for Christian, Dalton, and all of them to practice together and play against each other.
Exactly. I don't ever see. Yeah, I guess I do. I don't see them practicing together much.
They used to more, but they haven't lately.
Well, hopefully when we open back up again, we'll be able to see those guys out there getting after it.
And they needed to be able to do it with not in a setting with us, like they need to do it on a
just the three of them, no parents, just go out and do their thing.
Mm-hmm.
They'll learn a lot from that.
If you ever want to motivate Dalton, just bring up the name Blake White, I think it is, or something, or something like that, or Ben White or something. Just say that next time, Bobby.
Yeah. What do you think White's doing right now?
I played with him.
We were trying to motivate. Oh, did you? How's he doing?
At Stony, he did
Ben
pretty
White.
good.
You played Ben White.
He's not.
We should all text him right now.
But
D-Pain?
We should all text Dalton right now.
His hip
how's Ben
rotation
White
looked
doing?
What do you think White's doing? He's probably playing.
So we were trying to. Bobby, did you hear this story? We were trying to motivate D-Pain, Andy and I, after one of his lessons.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't think he was working hard enough at it, right, Droid?
Correct.
He was in the pro shop a lot. He was kind of schluffing around, and we're like,
yeah.
And Andy and I we weren't having it. We're like, dude, this guy's got too much potential, and we want to make the most of it. And what Andy and I came up with was like, okay, let's look at his class rankings on NJGS, and see who's number one. And he knew the guy. He's like, yeah, I play them all the time. So every time he's sloughing off now, his name is Ben White or Black White or something, I don't know. And we're like, yo, what's White doing right now? He's like, gets back to practicing. It's pretty funny, man. It's hilarious, and like it resonates with him, and it kind of like it's like, oh yeah, okay, he's probably grinding right now, you know.
I got a question. What do you guys see in his hip mobility? Is it tight or because he doesn't? If I look at his hip, I see his hips move and I see Christian's move, and Christian's move a lot more than Dalton's do in his swing. Like
at what part? Backswing or through
at the
impact?
top of his swing, that Christian's are more turned and his right hip is more on that left side than Dalton's are.
I would say Dalton's his backswing turn is fairly good actually.
Mhm.
He the only thing with him right now when we tested him, he has kind of a Bubba Watson. He's throwing a lot of pressure early in transition,
Mhm.
and then at impact his weight's on his right side, so he gets this little stall out little thing
Yeah,
with his hips.
That's why you saw that weird finish before.
Right. But his overall, like if you put a line on his crack, his butt goes on this side of the line.
Okay. It just doesn't look, I don't know. Visually, it doesn't look like his hip turns as drastically as Christian's.
Like Christian kind of
Mhm.
moves off and then turns.
Yeah, exactly.
So his actually sometimes over rotate, which
Okay.
it's hard for him to catch him back up.
hmm He hit it pretty
That's
good
why-
today.
Did he? Good.
He had one hosel rocket with a wedge, and then he dropped another ball and hit it at 3 feet from like 105
Hey, is
yards.
Christian pretty in to out because of that?
Yeah, he hits draws.
Has he ever hit any shanks?
I don't know if
I
I've seen
don't
it,
think so.
but he does draw the ball more. The one thing I saw with Dalton, he had his 2-iron. He was hitting that a lot of spin to the right.
So he's probably just swinging too far left and a little too steep.
hmm Like one of them, it sounded flush, but it was just had a lot of spin right. So
Yeah, I've noticed when he gets that, he gets a little picky upper. He picks it up a little bit more and gets
Is
a
it 'cause
little
that-
more.
is that club's because the club's so long, it's upright more.
Yeah, and of course he's trying to cut it, but he's doing it too much.
He hit one pure and it was pretty straight and it draw just a little bit. It was the one he hit the most on. I think it was on 13 tee. He pured it. The rest of them were kind of a little in the heel and kind of side spin.
All right, boys, we need to wrap this thing up. My wife's gonna kill me.
Bobby, the range is open on Saturday.
Yep.
Is that
so-
teaching as well?
As far as I know, I'm getting one at 3:00.
All right, cool. So we're back in action on Saturday.
Yep.
Nice. Cheers,
All right.
boys.
All right. I'll
Cheers,
see you
thanks.
guys
We gotta
Saturday.
get a virtual cheers.
Thanks for
Yeah.
everybody coming out.
Yeah,
We'll
Cinco de
we wanna-
Drinko.
we'll try to do it again next week. All right.
All right. See you, boys.
All right,
Thanks
sounds
for
good. See you,
putting us
boys.
together, bro.
Yeah.
All right. See ya. Bye.